We're going to continue our study of Masechet Megillah, page 13b. And here, now that Haman has in private plotted his annihilation of the Jewish people, he decides to put his plans into action. And the interesting thing is that this conversation takes place on the 13th day of Nisan, a full 11 months before the actual day slated for the annihilation of the Jewish people, which is the 13th day of Adar. And the question was, why is Haman running to the king to get his plan going, literally the day or days after he's risen to his position? Why not first cement his position? Why not first ensure that he's really in power? And eventually he'll deal with his Jews. Anyway, he has a date set aside. He's prepared for his annihilation. Why introduce it to King Achashvairosh a full 11 months prior to when it's actually necessary? And the Mefarshim tell us something very interesting. That Haman, as a raving anti-Semite, did not only want to see the Jewish people dead, he wanted to see them squirm. He wanted to see us suffer. As some of the Mefarshim put it, he wanted to see us live a hopeless life, dying slowly, a little bit every day. And he figured that once he'd get his plan together, eventually the plan would get out, slowly, as he wanted it to. The rumors would begin to filter. The people would live with anxiety and fears and doubts, and then at some point it will become official knowledge. And the Jewish people would be walking around with a target on their back. They'd be abused by all kinds of people because you're slated for death anyway. Just like the Jews were abused in 1938 in Germany. And then the cherry on the top would be the full annihilation of the Jewish people in one day across the entirety of Achashvairosh's empire or kingdom. That's the plan. That's the plan. So how do you do this? So he's got to get Achashvairosh, he's going to marshal every bit of charisma and ability and wherewithal to make sure that Achashvairosh is prepared to go along with this. You see, at the end of the day, Achashvairosh is going to be the one to supposedly pull the trigger. Achashvairosh can't blame anybody. He's the king. The buck stops with him. He's the boss. And Achashvairosh has other concerns. Yes, he's a raving anti-Semite, but he also has a kingdom to keep together and an empire to lead. And the economy is part of it, and the Jewish people could easily have been seen as part of the engine that drives the economy. No king is going to be happy about hearing such a thing. And so, as many of those later on in history, Haman sets out to make the case. And the Gemara, on the bottom of page 13b, begins with the following words. So Haman says, Yeshnoi am echad. Now he begins his presentation. And this is in the 3rd chapter of the Megillah, in the 8th verse. Haman begins the presentation. He says to Achashvairosh, after soon they'll sit down for lunch, but first they're having a power meeting. And he says to him, Yeshnei am echad. There is one nation. That's how he introduces the conversation. We'll talk about this nation. So the Gemara says, Omar Rava. Rava said, I want you to know. You should know something about Haman. That Haman was an individual who was leka de yode lishna bisha. Nobody knew how to slander like Haman knew how to slander. He was the master of what they call the evil tongue. Master of defamation. Now, of course, what does this mean? And why does Rava begin by emphasizing, before he tells us what Haman said, his first introduction to kind of teaching us how to analyze the words of Haman is that Haman is a master of defamation. Okay, we'll find it out ourselves. We'll see how he defames the Jewish people. What does this mean? What does this mean when we say, Leka de yode lishna bisha? Nobody knew how to slander like Haman knew. So the Mefarshim explain it in a number of ways. First of all, the Sifsei Chacham says that Haman's slander was on multiple levels. First of all, he portrayed the Jewish people as being rebellious against God and those who had abandoned their faith and their covenant. And he also presented them as miserable human beings, being bad for others. Now, historically, we've been depicted one way or the other. We've been depicted as loyal to God, but bad for humanity, or bad for God, but good for humanity. That's how it is like in today's day and age. But Haman wanted to make sure that he covered all his bases. So he said, they're not religious anyway. They don't follow the laws they're supposed to. They will not have the protection of the God. He knew that Achashvairosh was a deeply anxious person who had all kinds of fears and concerns, and he was superstitious. And history does not tell a kind story about those who rose against the Jewish people. Historically, they all fail, and they're all gone. Achashvairosh knows this. He's a keen student of history. He's crazy as a fox. Very smart guy. So the first thing Haman has to speak about is how the Jewish people are not really the Jewish people anymore. They're not deserving of God's blessing. And he also speaks about the fact that they make no real contribution to life in the kingdom. You will lose nothing by getting rid of the Jews, he says. Your kingdom, your empire will continue to flourish. In fact, it'll be even better. That's how the Sifsei Haman puts it, and that's the emphasis of the slander, the double-edged tongue of Haman, in which he attacked the Jewish people, so to speak, on two fronts, understanding both and exploiting both of Achashvairosh's concerns or weaknesses. In a sefer called Tuvei HaChaim, he has a very interesting analysis of Haman's words. He says that, as a rule, you cannot deny that the Jewish people have always made contributions. You can't deny that. Some of the people who are defaming Israel today are using Israeli technology to do it. That's the latest revelation. They don't even blush, these animals. They don't care. They're using web technology that's made in Israel to defame Israel, to do things like BDS. These are people who are benefiting from Israeli technology for the restoration of their own health as they demonize Israel, which once was the Jew amongst the nations, and now Israel is the Jew amongst the nations. Once it was individualized, and now anti-Semitism has metamorphosed into anti-Zionism, anti-Israelism. It's all the same thing. It's all baloney. And you'll come to me and say, but there are so many Jews who buy into this. Yes, so they're self-hating. That's very sad. The Jews are too blind to see, who are so loyal to the golden calf they worship, of atheistic values and mores of the West, and an abandonment of Torah Judaism. Nebuch, very sadly, they're misguided, and they actually believe that you can make a distinction and differentiation between Israel, between love of Israel, and between the people of Israel and the God of Israel. But really, it's not true. At any rate, so the Tuvei HaChaim says like this: if you were Haman, what would you need to do? You can't just outright deny the virtues of the Jewish people. So he says what you would need to do is portray whatever values or good things that the Jewish people had brought to the table as incidental rather than intrinsic. They happen to do a couple of good things. Everybody gets lucky. You know, a broken clock is right twice a day. So they did a few good things. But intrinsically, there are rotten people. And in this way, he actually talked about the truth. He talked about the truth. He said they have virtues. But the virtues that they have, he said, are incidental. They have demerits. Everybody has them. But this is who they really are. These are defining characteristics. And therefore, because of that, the king doesn't really need them. It would be a good idea to get rid of them. Now, the Yada's Dvash says that, of course, Haman could not simply hurl open lies and just make up stories about the Jewish people. That wouldn't fly. Achashvairosh was too smart for that. And if a person wants to, create and fabricate stories, you could just fabricate endless stories. So what he really did, Haman, was take things which were true, but frame them a certain way. And if you ask me, this is the first documentation of fake news. Because fake news doesn't tell news that doesn't happen, it frames the news. And you read two different newspapers, or sometimes even the same newspaper, that's printed in a different part of the country or in a different country, and the headlines and the storyline are different, reporting on the facts. But instead of telling you objective reportage, you're reading an editorial. So Haman editorialized. He had his own way of framing what the Jewish people did. Nobody can deny that we're a nation that has survived through thick and thin. Nobody can deny that we're a people that has been persecuted more than any other nation on the face of it. Nobody can deny this. So when a freshman congresswoman sends out openly anti-Semitic tweets. She gives the apology, the yes but. The yes but apology is called fake news because it's taking the facts. So, well, of course I acknowledge the facts, but you have to look at the facts in a certain way. And what about framing it this way, that way, or the other way? That's really what this is. So the whole fake news industry, from the right to the left, are very, very good students of Haman. That's the truth. Now, it's true, Joseph Goebel, Yamach Shemo, a great grandson, spiritual descendant of Haman, he said, if you tell a lie often enough, eventually people will believe it. That's true, but like P.T. Barnum said, you can fool all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time. But you cannot simply just tell endless lies and expect actually to fool the people. So when Rabbi Lau was here, he told me about a meeting in Davos in Switzerland where Arafat got up in front of all the nations of the world, and Shimon Peres was just sitting next to him, and just demonized Jewish people. Literally just made stories out of thin air, talking about Israeli warplanes dropping chemicals and radiation on hospitals, killing babies, like ridiculous things. And unfortunately, Mr. Peres did not defend the Jewish people. He made light of it, and he said, haha, I thought we came for an engagement, and instead we came for a fight. Let's not talk about it. And he told me, he was looking around the room, and all these people sitting there shaking their heads. See, he's not denying it. Okay, fine. So, I mean, like Arafat Yamach Shemo could sell his arsenic, his poison, his baloney to people, but like nobody really believes that. I mean, there are flaming anti-Semites who will buy into that, but normal people can't believe that. So what do you tell a normal person? Well, you have to frame Israel as the aggressor. You tell the story. Look, there was a demonstration. Israeli soldiers shot the demonstrator. You forgot to mention that these demonstrators actually came with knives and Molotov cocktails and was sending over balloons filled with explosives, hoping that Israeli children will be wounded and killed, that these people actually are seen on camera singing and dancing, that if we get through the gate, we literally will cut people's hearts out and eat their livers. This is the peaceful demonstrators. But you frame it differently. Right? So you frame it a certain way, or you have the cameras will zoom in and you'll see the child facing down a tank. Yeah, sure. What you're not showing you is all the people throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails behind them because you're showing a certain image. This is Haman. This is Hamanic. And to me, this is chilling and kind of even inspiring because it tells us that people have been doing this against our people forever. And guess what? We're still here. Haman isn't. And the Hamans of today will go the same way. But at any rate, that's why Rava introduces these words. It's very important to understand the things that Haman will be mentioning, things that Haman is going to talk about. These are things which are rooted in truth. However, they're twisted beyond recognition. So he turns a caricature out of the truth. And by turning a caricature out of the truth, Haman basically gets his message across that says, you don't want these people. This is a terrible travesty, a disaster for Persia. We need to get rid of them. So that's the introduction to the Gemara. What does he say? And this is really interesting because the first thing that Haman says is ta nechalinhu. Let's destroy them. Let's destroy them, he says. Now, before he says let's destroy them, before he even talks about why, the first thing he says, let's destroy them. And the fact that he says let's destroy them is very, very revealing. What does it tell us? What does it tell us about Achashvairosh? He was an anti-Semite. He didn't like us. He didn't like Jewish people. You could never come to a person who's philo-Semitic and say, let's kill the Jews. And the person who's philo-Semitic say, I beg your pardon? Why should we kill anybody? Yeah, kill the Jews. Let's just kill them. Kill the nation. Get rid of them. Annihilation. Wipe them off the face of the earth. And no person is not going to listen to words like that. So why does he begin that way? That tells us something. The fact that he said, let's do this, let's get rid of him, let's annihilate them, tells us that Achashvairosh, he could suffer a conversation like this. He had his issues, his anxiety, his suspicions and fears, but okay, yeah, we could do that, but. So what's the issue? He goes on to say. Now, it's very interesting. The Chacham asks the question, he says, exactly who was going to make this decision? Haman or Achashvairosh? Who makes the decision? Who's the king? Achashvairosh is the king. And we know that Achashvairosh didn't like people sitting in his seat. And we'll find out later when Achashvairosh now becomes, when everything turns on its axis, and Achashvairosh suddenly says, Haman is after my position. Who is this Haman guy? He says, what should we do for somebody the king wants to honor? And Haman says, the king wants to honor. That means me, of course. Oh, dress him up in royal robes and a crown. And he sees the king's face turning color, so he drops the crown from the rest of his description, because why would he say to Achashvairosh, hey, let's kill him, as if we do this together? That would not serve Haman's purpose as well. So the Sifsei Chachamim says that if it's Achashvairosh's decision, he has what to fear. He will have to take responsibility. The first thing that Haman says, you don't have to take responsibility. I'm in this with you. Fake leaders don't want to take responsibility. Fake leaders always want to have somebody else take responsibility. Who could we blame for the situation? Who can we pawn this off on? Some heads got to roll. A disaster happened, a few heads roll, and the leader comes out looking clean. That's fake leadership, also known as political leadership oftentimes in the Western world. Achashvairosh did not want to handle this hot potato himself. And Haman knew that. He says, we're going to do this. All of us. This is going to be done together. And that's why he begins in that pluralistic expression. He says, Nechalinhu, we will destroy them. So the Gemara says, Achashvairosh responded, and he says, Amar lei, mistafino me'elakov. Yeah, I hate Jews, but I'm a little afraid of their God. He doesn't do so kindly with things like this, their God. And, I don't know, history hasn't dealt kindly with people who try to do stuff like this. So maybe it's not a good idea. Now Haman probably expected this. And Haman had his arguments all prepared. And he says, I'm afraid of their God, Deloi le'evid bei kido'avda bekamoi, so that he doesn't do to me what's been done to my predecessors. What happened to Achashvairosh's predecessors? Going all the way back to the Pharaoh. They got destroyed. Haman says, I don't want to be destroyed, Achashvairosh. I mean, it's a nice thing to talk about, let's kill the Jews, but it doesn't work well. In the end, we'll be gone. So, to this, Haman responds, Omar Lei says, you're worried about the God? Worried about the God? You have nothing to worry about. Yashno min ha-mitzvahs. When he says Yeshno am echad, Yeshno, there is one, it really should have said Yesh am echad. Why does it say Yeshno? That's an unusual word. And the fact that it doesn't say the word Yesh, but says Yeshno, what does this tell us? This tells us that the Haman was trying to say, do not be afraid of their God. They have abandoned him. They're sleeping. They're sleeping at the switches. They're not engaged. So their God won't come after you. So Haman, Achashvairosh says back to Haman, he says, but Isbuhu Rabbanon, they've got some rabbis amongst them. So what does this mean? Well, there's two ways to understand this. Now, if you take a look in Rashi, Rashi says something very interesting. Isbuhu Rabbanon, Rashi says, Michuvasei shel Haman anu lemedim shekach haya Achashvairosh meshivei. From Haman's answer, we can understand what Achashvairosh was saying, because we don't really have the details of his conversation. We have to piece the conversation together. And from the fact that he said they're sleeping, and then Achashvairosh says, but they have rabbis, so we understand that the issue was that the people had abandoned God. They were vastly assimilated, no longer practicing. He says, but there are rabbis amongst them. So how do we understand the business with there are rabbis amongst them? So what if there are rabbis amongst them? It's just a couple of people. So the way the Mefarshim explain it is, one way of explaining it is, it's true, not all of them are observing, but there's enough observant Jews to create merit on their behalf. So if we kill all the Jews, we have to kill all the Jews, good Jews, bad Jews, all the Jews. And even though God feels abandoned by them, there are those who have remained fast, those who have remained committed. So that's why God will protect them. Another way of understanding this is, they have rabbis, is that the rabbis will pray. This is the Hasidic way of understanding it. That's how the Tzir Chaim says. He says, Yivakshu Aleim Rachamim. They'll go to the Rebbes, and the Rebbes will daven, and then Hashem will listen to those prayers. So I guess you could, it's different if you read it as when he says, Isbuhu Rabbanon, and he says they have rabbis amongst them, do you read it rabbis or Rebbes? If it's rabbis, so they'll bring merit to the Jewish people. or they can always bring the Jewish people back around. Somebody's keeping the Torah. Somebody's doing this. How did one self-described, assimilated conservative Jew, that's self-described, sent me an email, and the gist of his email was that he's very upset with the demonization of observant Jews, because he says, I know they're observing the Torah mitzvahs for me. He says, I owe them. He says. People like me are not going to produce the next generation of Jews. I care very much about Jewish people. He says, I have a lot of Jewish pride. I'll fight for being Jewish. He says, but I don't keep Shabbat. He says, I don't eat kosher. I don't do any of this stuff. He says, I know I probably won't have Jewish grandchildren. He said, but the Orthodox said they will. So why are they demonizing them in Israel? He says to me. He writes to me, it's the funniest thing. He says, I don't know. I don't care if they don't go to the army, he says to me. At least there'll be Jewish people worth fighting for in the next generation, he says. If nobody's studying Torah, there'll be no Jews left. It's a self-described, assimilated, non-observant, conservative Jew. I'm just using his labels, so his self-applied labels. The Gemara says, Achashvairosh said, they got rabbis there. They still got some Jews who are sitting and learning Torah. You can't just say. What the Tzur Amar says, they have Rebbes, and the Rebbes will daven, and the Rebbes will get God. They'll have some Barditchever Rebbe who will speak good about the Jewish people and convince Hashem. You'll have a Lubavitcher Rebbe who'll get everybody to do tshuva. It's not going to work, he says. I'm not going to be able to do this. So what do? We got a problem on our hands. Achashvairosh says, I don't think we can pull the trigger just yet on this thing. So Haman responds and he says, yeah, it's true. Amarle, but Haman says that they do have rabbis. He says, but Am Echad. They're still one nation. In other words, they're still responsible for each other. So it doesn't matter if some Jews are learning Torah, because if other Jews aren't learning Torah, then the Jews who are learning Torah are guilty for the Jews who aren't learning Torah. If they're Jews who do mitzvahs and Jews who are not doing mitzvahs, the Jews who are doing mitzvahs are responsible for the Jews who didn't do mitzvahs. So don't worry about it. The good Jews will get swept away with what Haman called the bad Jews. Don't worry. Their God will not be swayed. In other words, there's this notion of what's called arvos. There's responsibility for one another. And that is how the Gemara interprets the words. That's the subtle subtext of the words yeshno am echad. He said yoshnu. They're sleeping, like Marsha says. So he said yesh am echad. Doesn't say yesh, it says yeshno. And so why does yeshno am echad? Should say yesh am. We begin to speak. There is a nation. And Achashvairosh will say, what nation? A nation, a troublesome people, a nation. Instead he says, there is this nation that's one. So yeshno amecha. So the Gemara says, yeshno. So yeshno means yoshnu. That's the subtext. It says there's a sleepy nation. They're comatose. Their Judaism is dead and finished. And they're all one. So if there's a couple of rabbis there, that will not protect them, because the rabbis themselves will be held culpable. And of course, Mordechai was. He was culpable in the sense that he did take their welfare to heart. And Mordechai did bring about a massive transformation. The Jewish people did tshuva. So Haman wasn't wrong. Only he didn't realize how things would turn out. So from the notion that we have this idea of Yeshna Am Echad, there's this emphasis on Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lozeh, and therefore the rabbis will become guilty in everything that happens as well. Now, what did Haman just do here? Think about this. What did he just do? First of all, like the Sifsei Chum said right in the beginning, he said Haman over here was able to demonize the Jewish people on two levels. He right away started off by saying that this troublesome, pesky nation, don't worry, God's not going to come to their aid. So he kind of threw them under a bus, spiritually speaking. And then, after he does that, he continues to speak. Now, this Am Echad, which are all responsible for each other, and therefore, by default, one big failure, he says, this nation who has slept from mitzvahs, it's time to get rid of them. So Achashvairosh is going to be concerned. He doesn't say get rid of them yet, by the way. He just says, started off by saying, let's get rid of him. Get rid of who? Oh, this nation that's anyway weaned itself off God and no longer under his protection. So there's this nation. And it says, lest you say, now Haman already anticipates the next question. What's Achashvairosh going to be worried about next? First thing he's worried about is place in history, his survival. So, okay, fine. After that conversation, Haman knows what's next. What does Achashvairosh want? What does any monarch want? Control. Economic success. He says, it's not going to be good for my country. The economy is going to tank. Every normal leader of a country, I emphasize normal, worries about the economy of a country. Abnormal ideologues who don't care about the people, the citizens, or the country, but just their ideology, they take the country and destroy it. A la Venezuela. Who cares about the people if you can espouse the wonderful virtues of communism? So if you be an ideologue, who cares about what happens to the people? That's not normal. What's normal is that a leader says, I need to provide to my people. And the first responsibility of government is to provide prosperity, security and prosperity. The people should be secure and the people should be prosperous. You were elected by the people for the people. You have a responsibility to them, not to answer to your own ideas or ethos or whatever you consider to be sacrosanct. Unless, of course, you're in a communist situation where the people don't matter really. Instead, it's the way you decide the people are supposed to matter, or what people should be, what people should want. And if they don't know that, we can re-educate them. Like Mao Zedong will send them to some concentration camps, re-educate them, telling them what they should want to the gulags of Siberia until they come back saying, yes, singing our praises. So Achashvairosh was not an ideologue. He was not motivated by some kind of ideology. Achashvairosh was his ideology can be boiled down to one word. #me. It's all about me. What's good for me? Good for the people is good for me. If the people are happy, they'll love me. Great, let's do it. That's it. That was all Achashvairosh. Achashvairosh is very easy to understand. Whatever was good for him. Bad for his country, bad for prosperity, bad for security, bad for Achashvairosh. Forget it. So Haman knows this. And therefore Haman anticipates the next thing Achashvairosh is going to worry about. He says, Shema Tomer, lest you say, Karcha annihilation b'malchusecha. You say, I'm going to be creating some empty pockets, some holes in the fabric of my nation. You know, if you just kill people, have empty neighborhoods, we'll turn into some drug-infested brothel area. It's not a good idea. You can't just kill out empty neighborhoods or kill out provinces. It's bad for the country. It's bad for the economy. So he says, Shemer Teimar, lest you say that they will create this karcha. A karcha means a patch. They'll create empty patches in your nation. Don't worry about it, he says. They're not even concentrated. They don't even live together. He says, this yeshno am echad, this one nation that's responsible for each other, they're mefuzar u'mefeired bin amen. They're scattered here and there. They won't even stay together. They won't even defend each other. They don't even live together anymore. They don't care about each other. Don't worry about it, he says. You're not going to have this huge gaping hole in the fabric of Persian society. It's fine. You pluck them out, like gray hairs, and everything be fine. You won't know the difference. Shema Taimar ishano minayu. But lest you say, but the Jews have made a significant contribution to the welfare of the kingdom. They're good citizens. They pay the taxes. These guys are scientists and expert business people, industrialists, builders. Come on, this is not good for me. So he says, don't think so. Jews may have done some things, but they are not inherently industrious people. They are not intrinsically people who are givers. They're just takers. They're bloodsuckers. This is like Joseph Goebbels, like straight out of Hitler's playbook. He says, mefurad is a play on words. Kiprei dozu, like a mule. Now mules are a cross between a donkey and a horse. And the interesting thing is about mules is they cannot procreate. They do not produce offspring. He says they don't really produce anything. Jews are not productive. We don't produce. They will not, they may have done a few things, but they're not inherently productive. So therefore you don't have nothing to worry about. You get rid of him, your country won't know the difference. Now, if you think about it, if Hitler, wouldn't have gone after the Jews, he probably would have controlled the whole world. Why? Because a little scientist named Einstein would have stayed in Germany. And if Hitler had nuclear capability, can you imagine what the world would look like today? We'd all be speaking German. I mean, this guy literally could have controlled the whole world. But his hatred for the Jews was driven by an ideology that blinded him with such hate that he destroyed himself in his hatred for the Jews. So, but Haman is blinded by that kind of hatred. Achashvairosh at this point he's not blinded by his hatred. See, I hate him too, but it's not going to be good for the country. Don't fool yourself, he says. It'll be great for the country. These people are parasites and bloodsuckers. They are not inherently productive. And that's the idea of mefoirad bein ha'amim, like a mule, like a preda, like an animal that cannot procreate. Maybe you'll say they have their own country. And Jews were moving back to Israel at the time. As Nachmanides says in his introduction to Masechet Megillah, many Jews are living in Israel already. He says they have a country, and that country is part of your kingdom. He says, don't fool yourself. He says, Talmud Loimar, the pasuk says, B'chol medinas malchusecha. So many of them don't even care about Israel. So many of them are not moving back to Israel. They're all over the place. They're all over. It's not like you'll kill the Jews, you'll have an empty country all of a sudden. It's not the case. They're everywhere, the Jews. You kill the Jews everywhere. We just rout out all the trouble, and the country continues. You won't even blink, he says. You won't know the difference. Everything will be just fine. And now, he continues to make the case. So, now let me ask you a question. Is it true that the Jewish people lived all over the place? Yeah, it is true. It is true. Is it true we didn't make a contribution to society? That's ridiculous. Mordechai was a general in Achashvairosh's army. He actually led an army in battle to the valor of Persia. And Mordechai now is sitting as a parliamentarian in the king's gates. He's an advisor of the king. He doesn't make a contribution. I mean, we've made contributions in every society we've lived in and every country we've lived in. There's no reason for us to assume we didn't make contributions to Persian society or civilization in its time. And of course, we became favorite citizens after the story of Purim. We had to have been giving something, but Haman had a way of delivering fake news. He took the facts and twisted them. If you twist the facts, you can present anything as you please. This is exactly what's going on today in the media, where things are twisted to form a narrative. It's like the famous story told by the Dubno Maggid of a man who once came to visit an archer, and he saw bullseyes everywhere. And he said to the archer, how did you do this? I mean, I never saw anybody who always hits the arrow right in the center, dead center, every one. So I should back up and say somebody once asked the Maggid how he has the perfect story for every situation. So the Maggid said, let me tell you a story. And he told him the story about this archer, right? He says, the archer has every bullseye. So he asked him, how do you do that? So he says, simple. First I shoot the arrow, then I draw the target. The conclusion is there before the inquiry. We know what the conclusion of the article has to say. Now how do we get there? We know that this has to be bad. It has to be bad. Why does it have to be bad? Because ideologically it's bad. We don't support this. So how do we now create enough smokescreen when clearly the facts are telling a different story to obfuscate the facts or to create enough doubt or enough confusion so that at least we mitigate or blunt its impact and make sure that we still tell our story in the strongest of ways by framing it by other things and with a little bit of misinformation, but always using, news, it is news. I'm like amazed by this, like how Haman mastered the idea of fake news before anybody knew there was something called fake news. It's amazing. He's the father of this. And remember, he's selling his story. It's not like the Nazis who were a totalitarian regime who were telling a story to people who didn't mind hearing the story and buying it, but like Achashvairosh has to be convinced of this. And he's the one who has everything to lose, and actually not that much to gain. So Haman can't just make up lies. He's got to give him some kind of cogent logic, rhyme and reason to be able to get him to agree. So with regard to this notion of Yeshnei Am Echad, that there's this one nation that's mefuzar u'mefeired bein ha'amim, that's spread about through all of the different parts of the kingdom. The deeper meaning of this, of course, is that the Jewish people are ultimately an Am Echad. Even when we're spread about everywhere, we still remain united. And that's actually the point. That's what's amazing about Am Yisrael, that we are a family. And that even when we look differently, and even when we behave differently, and even when we've been separated and disparate for many, many centuries, ultimately, we're able to come together because really we are. And what is it, Am Echad? The Am Echad is to bring the Echad of Hashem, Ba'aretz, The idea of Hashem Echad is Yeshna Am Echad Mefuzir Mefeired. Our idea is to bring Achdos Hashem, to bring the knowledge and awareness of God consciousness and of God's presence in all nations and wherever we are. And therefore, wherever a Yid is, Mefuzir Mefeired, and Jews, of course, live everywhere and are scattered, except for the countries that will not allow us to live there, while they claim to be democratic. So, when we're there, what's our job? And the answer is, our job, our mission, our purpose is to remember that we are an Am Echad. An Am Echad. And we remain united. There's more that unites us than divides us. And we have to focus on those details. That's the opposite of Haman. That's the true news. The real news is that we are an Am Echad, despite the Mefuzir Mefeired, despite the many ideologies, despite the many different backgrounds, despite the different affiliations, despite the levels of observance or lack thereof. Ultimately, we really are an Am Echad. That's the real story, not the way Haman portrayed it, of course. So we have this nation. And now Haman goes in for the 1-2 punch. And he says, and not only are they not productive, not only will they not pose any danger in getting rid of them, there will be no big vacuum that's left. They don't fit in. They confound the development of this country. V'daseim sheinis mikolam. Their faith is different than all other faith systems. All faith systems can kind of get along. All faiths, more or less, they believe in the same thing. No, not the Jewish people. They have their own rules. They play by their own ideas. They will not eat our food, he says. And not only will they not eat our food, they will not marry our women. And not only this, they will not give us their daughters to marry either. They don't want to have intermarriage. They don't want to assimilate. They don't want a melting pot. They don't want any of this. There was a famous play, a Broadway play that was written by a Jew, and a very assimilated Jew. Somebody will remind me the name, I'll remember it. That Teddy Roosevelt himself was very enthusiastic about this play. He saw the play and he got up, he was cheering. It was about, it was like a Russian Jew who had come from the pogroms. He was like, I think he almost like some of the verbiage people use about melting pot. Like it came from this Broadway play. That's where. Anyway, it was about this Cossack who came to kill the Jews in a shtetl, and he come to America. And in the end, the Cossack marries a Jewish girl. And it's America, the Golden Medina, the amazing place where all of the ugly biases and hatreds can be left on the other side of the ocean. And in America, we can have a true melting pot. True melting pot.
It's called the melting pot.
It's called the melting pot. I told you the verbiage of it. What was the name of the Jew?
The play by Israel Zangwill.
Israel Zangwill. I knew it was somewhere in my memory. Israel Zangwill. And if you Google somewhere, you'll read about Teddy Roosevelt, the President of the United States. Yes?
Yeah.
Attending the play and enthusiastically clapping Zangwill on the back and say, "That's a play, man," or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
Straight.
That's a great play, Mr. Zangwill.
That's a great play, Mr. Zangwill. Okay, see, I remember something. That's a great play, Mr. Zangwill. The melting pot. The melting pot. This is, we're all going to come together, and we're all going to be united, and we're all going to, not the Jews, they don't want to assimilate. They don't want to be like us. They don't want to become part of our nation. And so you got to get rid of these people. And not only this, not only they want to do that, you think at least they're loyal subjects and citizens? No, they don't do the rules, they don't do the bidding of the king. They're not loyalists either. What do? The mafki lechoila shata b'shehi pehi. The Gemara says this exactly. B'shehi pehi. He says they find all days of the year, they find this business of shehi is an acronym for Shabbat Hayom. And pehi is Pesach Hayom. But the Mefarshim say that Haman, in his hatred, he didn't even want to mention the name Shabbat. And he was also superstitious. He thought if he mentioned the name Shabbat, that might be like positive to Jewish people. He mentions Pesach. He don't mention the words. So he used an acronym. If Achashvairosh wanted, he could Google it and find out what exactly Shehi meant and Pehi meant. But he says that the Shahai and the Pahai, every day they come with a new story why they can't work. It's terrible for the economy. They're always taking vacations.
He knew that.
Huh?
He knew that he was talking about the Jews.
Of course he knew. course he knew. He was right in there at this point. So if you look in the Medrash, the Targum Sheni, there's many versions of this Medrash, but it says there's this nation that all they do is they're lazy people. They take these vacations all the time. All they do is eat and drink. And now they say it's Einig Shabbos. Now they have to pleasure themselves on Shabbos. Then they say it's Einig Yom Tov. Then they say it's Yom Tov. He says a whole day they're eating and drinking and having parties. Every 7 days they have a vacation. By the way, the idea of a weekend is a Jewish idea. I'm serious. It didn't exist once upon a time. There's documentation in the Gemara of the Romans mocking us for being lazy, unindustrious, because we take off every week. Who has a vacation every week? It's a holiday once a year where people went berserk and nuts. They had the Mardi Gras once a year when they dropped all inhibitions, do whatever they want, and went back to living and working. He says every 7 days, every 6 days, that's it, it's Shabbos again. Then they have to eat and drink and sing songs and be happy. And that's every 7 days. And every 30 days, he says, they have a new celebration called Rosh Chodesh, another celebration. Some of them don't do work. And then this in the month of Nisan comes spring, they have a Pesach. Comes the summer, all of a sudden they have a Shavuot. Comes Tishrei, forget about it, they make a New Year, then they stop eating, then they eat again afterwards, then they build this hut out there and they sing and dance in their hut. He says, crazy people, totally unindustrious. They're a cancer. They're eating away at the core of the country with their constant desire for recreation. You got to get rid of these people. So it's really interesting. He targeted the festivals, right? He targeted the festivals, and he said, and the Medrash says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, "Ata mapal ayin hara b'mayadeyim." You're casting an evil eye, and now we know what an evil eye means. A fake news eye. You're presenting the Yom Tov. Arei ani mapilcha lefneim. I will throw them down before you, and they'll give them another Yom Tov. Another Yom Tov. You attack their holidays, because of you, another holiday will be added to the annual repertoire. Of course, that's the holiday of Purim. And by the way, and it's not really connected to the Gemara, but so the Rabbi explains this Medrash in an amazing way. He says, if you look at every Yom Tov has its central idea, its central message. So on Pesach, we talk about the concept of freedom, of liberty, of going out of Mitzrayim. And that's what it represents. Shavuos represents the end of the Sfirah Omer. It represents working through the animal soul, elevating oneself, going from the barley to the wheat, the idea of commemorating the giving of the Torah. Okay, and every Yom Tov has its idea. Shabbos has its idea. God created the world in 6 days, rested on the seventh. It has a specific focus. But what does Purim celebrate? Which part of Yiddishkeit does Purim address? The Rebbe says really no part. There's no specific part. What is the message of Purim? It's an overriding message. It's the message of Jewish eternity. That's the message. We are. We are, and we will continue to be. Not a detail of our Yiddishkeit. It represents something overriding. And the Rebbe says all of the Yomim Tovim have limits to the way we celebrate them. In fact, he quotes a Rambam in Hilchos Yom Tov, where the Rambam says that Simchas HaRegel, with regard to the festivities, during the holidays, lo yimoshech b'yayin u'b'schek u'b'kal seish. You shouldn't get swept away into too much consumption of wine and levity and lightheadedness. He says shashikrus v'haschoik, drunkenness and intoxication, laughter, lightheadedness. At some point, it's not joy anymore. It's just boisterous and empty. It's a vacuous kind of celebration. It's not meaningful. It's not serene. It's not uplifting. And that's how Rambam describes you should celebrate Yom Tov. But the same Rambam also says, and this is brought down in Shulchan Aruch, on Purim you're obligated to imbibe in wine until you don't know what's up or down, until you don't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. In other words, that the chiyuv, that the obligation of the Simcha and Purim is to go out of all limitations. You see, because all of the other Yomim Tovim represent something specific to Yom Tov. Haman tried to attack the Yomim Tovim. And what was God's response to him? Not you try to attack the Yom Tovim in their individuality, in their frames. I will, because of you, provide the Jewish people with a Yom Tov which has no limitations. The Yom Tov which transcends rhyme and reason, and that's for us the holiday of Purim. Anyway, but we're reading here the Gemara where Haman is attacking the holidays of the Jewish people. And part of the message is they're just lazy, unindustrious, not interested in working, and as such, we should get rid of them. They're of absolutely no value to Achashvairosh and to his kingdom. And he says, Besides, if to add insult to injury, if that wasn't enough, for the king, there's no value in keeping these people around. No value in keeping these people around, he says, and besides everything else, the achlu v'shasu, that all they do is eat and drink, and gluttonous people, malchus, that they thusly shame the kingdom. But furthermore, now Haman makes it personal. This is the ultimate fake news. Personalize it. This is called the politics of race and gender, the politics of ideology. Not the politics of somebody's right because maybe they happen to be right now. No. Somebody's right because their skin is a certain color or it's not a certain color. Somebody's right because their orientation of how they choose to live their life intimately is different. Somebody is right or wrong because of what? Did you listen to what they said even? Well, who cares what they said? They have to be wrong. they have to be bad. That's exactly what Haman does. This is exactly what fake news does. Personalizes everything. So, gender politics. The guy is for sure bad. But the same Italian actress who got up at Cannes Festival and screamed, "We know who you are and we're going to go after you," all of a sudden it turned out that she did some of the most disgusting things to a boy who she played his mother on in a movie. She literally raped a little boy who was a teenager later on. Hello? People said, "We don't know." You don't know? Did you see the selfie that she took and tweeted? I mean, you don't know? Well, let's get the benefit of the doubt. Benefit of that for this. Why? Because the facts don't matter. It's how you present the facts. Personalize it. To me, this is just unbelievable. How nothing changes. So Haman says, and this is his 1-2 punch to finish, to drive his point home. He says, "Your Majesty, do you know who these people are? Let me tell you who these people are," he says. "Not only they're worthless, not only they have no contribution to your country, not only would their loss be a loss for none of us. Besides all of this, not only are they lazy and frivolous, they won't assimilate and they won't come together with us. Besides all of this," he says to him, "you should know that afilu neifel zvuv b'koisei shel echad mehem. If a fly is to fall into their wine, what would they do? It's cheap Jews. Zerka, they'll throw out the fly and drink the wine. However, if my master, the king, if he but touches one of their glasses of wine, they'll spill it out bekarka. They won't even drink out of the cup." Now he personalizes it. Of course, some go, "Yain esach." We're not allowed to drink wine. Because if a Gentile held the wine for a sacramental purpose, then for us, Torah prohibits it. So here, he personalized it. You, in their eyes, are worse than a mosquito. Wow, he says, really? They look at me as a cockroach. Now, Achashvairosh is fuming. And now he says, I'm gonna get them. Really? I think that's so bad. So now it's everything, textbook is that everything he's got to do. Told him all the things he wants to hear, exactly as he wants it. And so, if that's not good enough, now Haman says, if it's okay with the king, yikosev la'abdam. Let us write letters, let's get rid of them. Let's finish him off. But he only introduces his actual plan after he makes the case for it. He doesn't say, let's kill him and here's why, because he's afraid. If he first says, let's kill him, Achashvairosh might recoil. And then if he recoils, he's not even listening to anything he says. So before he tells him what he wants, he first makes the case. It's brilliant. First make the case. First get him to buy in. And now that Achashvairosh has taken it personally, and he's fuming, and he's certain his economy won't suffer, and he doesn't have to be afraid of their God. Now Haman says, let's get rid of him. And if that's not good enough, there's a payoff too. There's a payoff too. And he says, besides everything else, after he finishes making the case, he says, and I have 10,000 kikar of silver that I'm ready to hand over to the king. I'll pay you. The king's coffers will be enriched, not impoverished. In case there's any doubt left, and Achashvairosh cares about money at the end of the day. It's all about the money. He He says, don't worry. I will pay. I'm a rich man, he says. It's worth it for me. Because I honor you, your highness. I will replenish the royal coffers. If there's something missing, have no fears. Let's take a look in Rashi. We missed a bunch of Rashis. Rashi says, they'll make these empty patches because there's like one province or kingdom that's full of them. He says, if you'll say Medinasa, they have a little Medina, they have a little country. He says Medina Ktana, a little country. What did the European leaders say about Israel? It's a little something country. I don't want to repeat the words. Yeah, a little country. So let's get rid of him, he says. Leinas biminon. They won't marry. And Noshim Rashi says, talking about marrying the woman. They don't do the king's words, the king's bidding. Rashi says, Anagri esu misim, v'gulgolies, v'arnonas. When it comes to taxes and fees and fines, they don't pay anything. They don't pay their way. You know why they don't pay their way? They're claiming religious exemptions, tax exemptions. Now they have to work. Religious freedom. Have to have a day off. You know what it costs the country when all these Jews aren't going to work? He says, Mafkeluhu l'shata b'shehi u'pehi. Shabbos hayeh, Pesach hayeh, Rashi says, it's Shabbos, it's Pesach. V'anu asurim b'melacha. They say, sorry, can't work. The interesting thing is the Medrash talks about all the Yom Tovim. Here he only talks about Shabbos and Pesach. So there's a big discussion about this in the Mefarshim. Why do we emphasize only on the concept of Shabbos and Pesach? And some of the Mefarshim say something very interesting. Say, anybody who's made Pesach knows that Pesach is not just 8 days. It's not just 8 days. People already are anxious about Pesach, okay? Pesach is like a 2-month chunk out of a Jew's life. It's like your kishkas are turning like inside out already from the week before Purim, okay? Okay, I always beg the guy in Nofels, like, because they have like all the stuff comes in, like, it's like 4 days before Purim and they're busy dismantling all the Shalchmanos. I'm like, why are you doing this for? I said, head office, so we have to do it. I said, please, it's like the trauma is hard enough for us. Do I need to come 3 days before Purim and see all the Pesach food out already? Like, there's wars going on and people shopping and cleaning and the nerves, right? It's like he said, this is like it's like a whole focus for these people. Whole focus. It's a Shabbos. A real Jew, keep Shabbos for real. Would really be observant Jew. It's not just Shabbos. Shabbos affects everything. Shabbos says your whole week has changed. So you choose the two Yom Tovim that have the biggest footprint. Shabbos got the biggest footprint that affects the whole week. Now you're going from Shabbos, then you're going to Shabbos. Where will I be for Shabbos? Where won't I go on Shabbos? And then there's Pesach. It says, like a Shavuos, okay, eat blintzes, take a day off. It's not 2 days. It's not an 8-day thing. The house doesn't turn inside out. Even Rosh Hashanah, fine, you have to hear some sermons, whatever, you go to Shul. It's not like, so you have a meal, but you want to really keep Pesach. Are you kidding? Nobody has a Rosh Hashanah kitchen. Nobody has a sukkah. A sukkah, you put up a hut, okay? It's how much anxiety goes. 4 days is enough to take care. From after Yom Kippur, you can get your sukkah up and you can get your lulav and esrog. 4 days all you need. You can get the job done. But Pesach, nobody makes Pesach in 4 days. Never happened. That's what Haman says. You see, he says, a whole month already they're talking about the holiday. Anyway, Zain Sheva. Ein Noah. It's not nice, he says. It's not nice. Here's the guy talking about annihilation. He says it's not nice. It's unbelievable. It's not nice, he says. You shouldn't even think twice. Let's get rid of him. So the Gemara says that at this point, Rish Lakish interjects. Amar Rish Lakish says, Goli v'yadua, it was open and known before Hashem. God knew that Haman would come to seal the deal with shekels. And so, Al Yisrael, as if to pay ransom for Israel. And that's why God first preempted the shekels of the Jewish people to the shkala of Shul Haman, to the shekels of Haman. This is the meaning of what we learned. Already on the first day of Adar, we're talking about the shekels. Now this, of course, could mean a number of things. It could mean that we're talking about the shekels at that time, which means they either gave machzis hashekel, and people query, 70 years after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, why were they giving machzis hashekel? The Chassam Sefer says something unbelievable. He says, reading Parsha Shkolim, the fact they were talking about the shekels already from the beginning of Adar, that in and of itself was a merit to shield them from the shekels of Haman. just talking about the mitzvah, just reading about the mitzvah. Others maintain that it was the concept of giving machzah shekel. And people would give a half a shekel symbolically, as we do today, connecting it to Purim. But even then, they would give symbolically a half a shekel. So we have a Mishnah that says, Be'echad ba'adar, the Bezdin already begins to get to work, ala shkolim v'ala kloyim, to deal with, since the earth is waking up in Israel, and you have fresh growth, and you could have different grains that are mixed together, which the Torah prohibits. The Bezdin has a responsibility of enforcing the agricultural laws in the land of Israel. So this already on the first day, beginning of Adar, this is when the messages start to go out. And here, Haman is trying to destroy the people on the 13th of Adar. So before the 13th, we have the idea of shekels, or it could be argued that long before Haman is already on the 13th day of Nisan, long before, 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, we already were talking about shekalim. And of course, in a broader sense, this means going back to the shekels of time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Although the Gemara doesn't say that openly. Gemara says, Mashmiyan Bezdin Machrizin. Bezdin announces, Sheyaviu Shkalim L'Migdash, they should bring Shkalim L'Migdash. Ala Kloyim, the last Rashi on the page, Shegadlu Hazroyim Ktsas, V'nitzan Nikar. Now things have grown a little. It's already in Israel. Time you get to beginning of Adar, getting to spring. So you could start to see, V'eikrin Misadeseyan B'achrozas Bezdin. You start to uproot anything which is inappropriate, growing unlawfully in the land of Israel, gets uprooted from this point and onward. So some of the Mefarshim talk about this idea, and they say that the Maharsha says, no, we're talking about the actual shekels that the Jewish people gave in the desert, the 600,000 people who were counted through Shkolim in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, with which the Adonim, with which the foundations of the Mishkan boards were placed or built. That's what the Maharsha says. And this is similar to the concept what we learned about in the previous class in the Gemara of Magdim Refuah L'Maka, that Hashem always brings the healing before He brings the injury. So you see here, Haman was bringing shekels. God says, yeah. I already got them on shekels before. We've been doing shkolim long ago. Now, some people maintain that this is because of the schus, the merit of tzedakah. But really, that's not what it says. It doesn't say the schus of tzedakah. It says the schus of the shekel specifically. And the Rebbe once asked, what is the interconnection between the shkolim of all things? I mean, you get half a buck, big deal. What's the connection between that and the concept of saving from the gezerah, from the decree of Haman? And he says that one of the unique things about Haman's time was that there was a gezerah, a decree against the Jewish people in equanimity. Everybody was equally targeted. It says, Minar v'ad zokin, young and old, taf v'noshim. Children, women, nothing made a difference. No gender, no age, nothing. Everybody was targeted equally. Every Jew was going to be killed. And this is not like other generations. For example, he says the Pharaoh, who did he decree against? Against the babies. He threw the babies into the river. And he wanted the male babies, not the female babies. Stalin, Yamach Shemo, what did he want? He didn't care if old people came to Shul. He didn't want any children in Shul. He didn't want a Jewish future. He said, let the old people, they can still, don't teach your children about it though. But here, it was an equal decree. Haman didn't care. Everybody was equal. So how do we nullify a decree like that? The Rebbe says, Machzas HaShekel emphasizes the concept of equality. Everybody giving exactly the same amount. Whether you're rich or poor, whether you're deeply observant, learned and experienced, or totally unaffiliated, you had to give the same half shekel. Not more and not less. So therefore, what does this mitzvah really represent? It represents the fact that ultimately every yid is equally important, that every yid is but a half to be completed by Hashem. Every one of us is the same amount. It's exactly the same amount. From the most famous Jew to the most forgotten Jew. Everybody had to give exactly half a shekel, no more, no less. And this is how the mitzvah of the shkolim, it's not just a shekel play. It's the shekel represents Haman's decree. Haman's decree was on all Jews equally. And this is the mitzvah was performed by all Jews equally. And so that's why it serves as the counterweight against this decree of Haman at the time. And this is how Haman began his conversation, so to speak, with Achashvairosh. And Achashvairosh went right along with this. He was okay. Another interesting thing about the business of Machzah Shekel, the Rebbe says that what happened with those shekels What did they use those machzah shekel for? For the foundation, for the silver sockets that the boards were inserted into. And ultimately, Haman wanted to kill all of the Jewish people. What did Mordechai awaken? The Pinteliyad, which is the foundation. The foundation, not the big tall building, not the structure, not the development, but the foundation. The foundation everybody has that's equal. And so the foundation everything was exactly uniform. Just silver sockets. And that essence of the Jewish people is what the shkalim were used for. So this is like the deeper meaning, a deeper, what we would call messaging, the deeper representation of the shkalim of Haman versus the shkalim of Moshe Rabbeinu, or the shkalim even that the Jewish people subsequently gave. I'm following the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu like Maharsha says, but in broader you could expand this, the idea of all Jews giving half a shekel was not only the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, but ultimately going forward also. So Haman paid off the king, and at this point, the king turns around and he says, wink, wink, you got a deal. Let's have lunch. Wanna see all over. Or before wanna see, the original wanna see. Let's have lunch. And Haman and the king sat down to drink, happy, satisfied that they had finally found a solution to the Jewish problem. And with this, we will conclude on the very, very bottom of Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, in which we have the king and Haman now striking an agreement, where Hamelech says to Haman, the kesef, keep the money, he says. And here we see what kind of anti-Semite he was. He loved money, but he said, you know what? I don't even need the money. Ha'am, the nation, ketoiv beinecha. Do as you please. And now we could have some dramatic music. This is where the official decree of the pre-Purim era, this is where the dark clouds have now fully formed and the plot is hatched. To be continued.